maybe the most fun game out of all of them, and that's Oklahoma City's win against New Orleans. So the defensive plan here for the Pelicans was to sell out against SGA in the first half. He only had 7 points in the first half, which was a season low for the first half. Herb Jones is my fucking hero. What he did with SGA, harassing him, whether he had the ball or not, the off-the-ball stuff where SGA didn't have the ball, face guarding him, just straight up in his jersey for the entire first half. And to SGA's credit, the thing I do love about him, and there's a lot of things you can talk about with him that you love, although some of the free throws, kind of bullshit. He's very patient. He was patient, and his patience was rewarded because Lu Dort turned into fucking Game 7 Thunder Rockets Lu Dort. And then Giddey went off, and his total stat line was a career-high 31, 9 boards, 10 assists. And Giddey is basically, he'd be a point guard on most NBA teams. He would have the ball in his hands. We know the shooting isn't there yet, but he's so big. If you haven't really watched him, because I know how this works, watch the next time Giddey's standing next to the opposing team's center. Like, you're like, wait a minute, what's going on there? I think there was a game against the Bulls where he was next to Vooch, and I go, he's actually, Vooch is a huge dude. And then you're expecting Giddey as this guard to be smaller. He's huge. He's fucking huge. Speaking of the Pelicans, we'll get to Zion here in a second. The one time I saw like Edwards in that matchup with Zion, and you saw Edwards, who's really put together next to Zion, you're like, my God, look how big Zion is, right? So Giddey has that to him. I know there's some mistakes there at the end, but the point of this is for OKC to not get anything from their all-NBA player in SGA and Herb Jones and all this length and the intensity. They got 32 combined from Dort and Giddey in the first half. Early in the game, it looked like the Valanciunas size thing was going to be a problem. He had a decent game. Jalen Williams, not the one from Santa Clara, the one from Arkansas, who I knew when I did his draft tape I couldn't stand because of all the bullshit charges. But he's a really smart player, even though he missed a million threes. I think he missed his first 6. He hit a huge one in his 7th attempt. He also had a weird Isaiah Joe to Jalen Williams 2-man game. Woo pig, where I wasn't expecting to see that in a play-in game, and then it was a running fucking hook shot, Magic Johnson against the Celtics style, or Bob Russillo against his son in the driveway for about 2 years. So that was a bit surprising offensively. So the reason I want to get back to the patience and the love here for SGA is that he didn't force it. Herb Jones is that good defensively. And I'll admit, too, as somebody who has a vote, all defensive teams this year, overall, like, I think I watch a lot. Even I get done with it going, have I done enough? Am I totally locked into what everybody's doing, whether it's on the ball or off the ball, and looking at the stats and all this kind of stuff? Because Herb Jones, what he did and how he stepped up against SGA was incredible. All right, let's get back to the point of the Thunder winning this game. Because once SGA knew, he knew a couple things. I don't know if Herb Jones can keep up this intensity. And the second I get a break from him, I'm attacking. And that's what he did. And then he even ended up getting Herb a couple times. But he had 25 in the second half. He had 10 points in the third quarter. This is, let's see here. This is the 40th time SGA has had 10 or more points in the third quarter this season. And then the drive left floater that he hit with 28 seconds left to give them the lead, 115-114, is essentially kind of your game winner. And all these young dudes, by the way, in these huge spots, made all of their free throws at the other end. For the Pelicans, Ingram got it going. I thought Lu Dort was getting away with, I wouldn't call it a felony, but it was up there. He was fucking working Ingram. And this is the next level of stuff. I thought Ingram was pretty good. He needed to be great. CJ needed to be good, and he wasn't. And even though the Valanciunas size advantage, which Dagnall admitted, he goes, we're kind of giving up something there. I love that he was so revealing. He was telling us, I'm sacrificing the size part of this. They don't really have the options. It's Jalen Williams or Saric. They just don't have that kind of size, and that's why for them against Denver, I wanted to sit here and say, I bet you OKC gets 2 of these games just because their effort, toughness, and smarts alone. But knowing they're going to be going to Denver, and I just don't know. Like, Jalen Williams trying to harass Jokic as much as he can. It'll be kind of the same thing that we saw in this game last night. Is it might look good the first few minutes. Maybe it even looks good for half where Jokic isn't necessarily even taking a ton of shots. But for him, he doesn't even need to take any shots to control a basketball game. So I'm just kind of thinking ahead of what that matchup's going to look like a little bit. If they beat Minnesota, if they beat the Timberwolves. So let's not get ahead of ourselves here. But it was just kind of, it was just, I was just so impressive from a young basketball team here where it all kind of leads back to like the Zion problem for the Pelicans, who are now out again. So OKC has 15 picks in the next 5 years at least. And yet they have 4 guys right now. They've got SGA, they've got Giddey, they've got Jalen Williams, who's going to probably finish second or third in Rookie of the Year. And I would include Chet as that 4th guy because it would be silly to write him off. And then that's with a couple other options and some role guys, Dort, Williams, Ousmane Dieng, potentially. There's some role options there. The craziest part about all of these picks is that if it were a different franchise in a different location, they could maybe then package the picks for a player and then go, cool, we did it. And we're adding this awesome max player to this group that we've already established. It's going to be terrific. OKC can't necessarily operate that way, right? Because they know they would never really be the likely destination for the mad guy who wants out. Well, likely is like 100%. Like, hey, I've fucking had it here in Brooklyn. Send me to the Thunder. That's not going to happen. All right. They could overpay. They could also do like what they did with Paul George, which feels a little Oakland A's back in the day, where it's like, oh, this guy, you're going to trade him? Well, we think he's really good, so we'll take him now, but then maybe we'll flip him for compensation or get some sort of free agency compensation on the way out for him. And that's kind of what the Thunder did with Paul George. So maybe they could do the 2-year disgruntled thing where they take the guy for the year and then they flip that guy again. I don't know if they're going to get the same thing for Paul George, which, as I reminded Simmons, we can never look at that trade for SGA and all the picks for Paul George in a vacuum because it guaranteed the Clippers of also getting Kawhi Leonard. But to think how established they already are, their over-under was 23. Yes, they have still some more work to do. I think the other thing that's really interesting is that they got talked about like this team that sucked forever, and they lost to the Rockets. That was only in 2020. So they had 2 seasons, 22 wins, 24 wins. They're already at 40 wins and potentially in the 1-8 matchup in the West. And that was not a long rebuild at all, like not even close, but it was just so torn down so quickly. It felt like they were getting labeled as this group that had, this purgatory vibe to them for way too long. And it's just not true. And they're already out of it. And yet there's probably 10 guys that are going to replace. 10 might be too much. I don't know. They could maybe just outbid everybody else for a trade, but there's still like 7 dudes coming. Let's just say 7. 7 more dudes added to the group to 5 to 7 are coming for this team. And that's only half of the 15 picks over the next 5 years. On the other side, that's less positive, you have the Zion Williamson holding the Pelicans hostage story. I love Jeff Van Gundy. I agree with almost everything he says. I learned something every single night he's on the broadcast. Last night I disagreed with him. He was trying to be positive, which might be rare for Jeff, and I liked it. He was like, look, Zion, as we saw him in, I don't know what the fuck that was last night, a hockey jersey, whatever. He said, look, Zion's only played 4 years, and he's played 114 games, and he used Joel Embiid's weird start to his career as a comp. Because Embiid, if you remember, missed the first 2 seasons, played 31 games. At that point, I was like, dude, 31 games the first 3 years of your career, not a great start. He played 94 games in his first 4 years because they were still sort of bringing him along slowly. Now, to counter my point, but also Van Gundy's point here, Zion playing 114 over 4 years is injury and apparently here at the close of this season, Zion's choice. Sam Hinkie didn't want Embiid to play. He wanted to keep losing games. That's why he and then Simmons sat out as long as they did. So it's not the same thing. The problem is that Zion then had media availability, which apparently he's been known to say he wanted to do and then wouldn't do. Now I'm kind of getting why he doesn't do it, because he totally fucked it up. Yes, he's a young guy. As I get older, I'm a little bit more. But then again, it's like we're talking about somebody who could be one of the best players in the league. He basically said he was health-wise ready to go, but mentally was still a little hesitant because sometimes he feels it and sometimes he doesn't, but that's basically just on the move alone. He was cleared 3 weeks ago. He's been playing 3-on-3 stuff that's rather intense. He hasn't wanted to do any of the 5-on-5 stuff. And from the looks of it, I don't know if it's a Kashmir situation. The reason he may not be clear is because he himself isn't in good enough shape. And I don't know if that's him. I don't know if that's just not being active enough and putting on the weight, or I don't know if it's the decisions that he makes that a lot of young guys make that are stupid until they realize like later on they got to start eating better and doing all that shit. So unfortunately for the Pelicans, despite this roster that we all like and turning it around to close the season, and Ingram playing the best basketball probably of his career, and some of these younger dudes who I think have a real chance to be additions to a good team's rotation, you're held hostage by the Zion thing because it doesn't seem like this guy is wired to get it yet. And we went over all of this last year, and then he got his money, which had some protections for the team. But I don't know why, if he were cleared 3 weeks ago, why I didn't think he could at least get ready to suit up for a little bit. And we can talk about trading him the same way the Trae Young rumors came out right before that game. The Gobert market, which probably doesn't exist, although no contract is untradeable. The irony of Chicago or Toronto going in different directions as we kind of recap all these different teams. The Zion part of this is a lot like, maybe not exactly like, it's not exactly like, because almost nothing is exactly like. When Anthony Davis was out and he was hurt and he was struggling, and the Lakers are like, wait, can we really make this guy the face of the franchise post LeBron? What that money's going to mean? Well, the bet is that you can't. All right. The safe bet is that you can't do that, despite how good Anthony Davis looked in that game and how he's looked since he came back in January. Right. But at least there's something there to a resume. The problem is with Anthony Davis, when it's at its worst and you go, what's the trade value? It's like whatever you were to get back for Anthony Davis, and yes, you would get something back for him, it would not match what you could be with him when he's healthy. Right. That's the dilemma that you would have anytime you were bringing this stuff up and wondering if the Lakers should get proactive and move him on the way out. And that's not even counting the LeBron factor where, on top of the Lakers turning everything else around, they didn't have to deal with the awful outcome of losing what could have been an insanely high pick if this season didn't bring in some hired guns. So back to Zion, he doesn't even have the AD resume. And if you're the Pelicans and you were like, well, let's see what happens. Let's see what's on the trade market. Somebody would do it, clearly. But is what we get back enough that matches what we would be with a healthy Zion because he's that good? And the longer this goes, the more willing you'd probably be able to deal as a front office with whatever those calculations are. Right now, last year was too early. Right now, still may feel too early. This can't happen another season. It can't happen another season. People work too hard. Your teammates work too hard. And, it's pretty clear that him getting back to whatever point he needs to feel to be comfortable has as much to do with him as anything. And that sucks because it was a fun season for the Pelicans until it wasn't.